Nammo Phat, good morning. It's April 28th, and we're here for our daily practice check-in. Listen, listen, listen. This beautiful sound calls us back to our true home. Today we're reciting the second mindfulness training. Aware of the suffering caused by exploitation, social injustice, stealing, and oppression, I vow to cultivate loving kindness and learn ways to work for the well-being of people, animals, plants, and minerals. I will practice generosity by sharing my time, energy, and material resources with those who are in real need. I am determined not to steal and not to possess anything that should belong to others. I will respect the property of others, but I will prevent others from profiting from human suffering or the suffering of other species on earth. This morning we'll finish the section from Ajahn Sucitto's book, Kamma and the End of Kamma, on programming, body, mind, and rationality. The meditative process has to work through three programs: body, thought, speech, and heart. The crucial program is Chitta Sankhara, which occurs with Chitta, the mind, as heart. This mind is the affective sense, which experiences meaning and feelings, and produces responses and attitudes. Because of Chitta, because we're sensitive, we interpret and derive meaning. We're moved in terms of happiness or sadness. Then, from the sense of enjoyment or disappointment, and so on, with how we've been moved, more deliberate purposes get formulated. We decide to act on a thought or impulse, and so there's fresh kamma, and it leaves resultant patterns. We favor and develop tastes that become my style, my attitudes, my take on things. The habitual nature of all this means that we see situations according to how we're accustomed to seeing them, and respond to them in standardized ways. Then it appears that this kind of thing always makes me feel like this. It really does make me, doesn't it? The sense of I am comes up very powerfully when our feelings are triggered. We don't notice or penetrate the triggering that moves us into what is sometimes painful, sometimes pleasant, but generally familiar emotional territory. It's familiar because it's a pattern and a program, often with a recognizable self as independent or victimized or fun-loving configured at the center of it. And as self gets patterned in there, we act in accordance with its program, get controlled, and sometimes overwhelmed, by its moods and impulses. There's a blur, a speeding up, a reaction, and something has been said or done from that bias. Our lives swerve accordingly through assumptions, subjective bias, and impulses that some mindful recollection would have let pass. What underpins this running on automatic is the underlying bias of ignorance, avijja, the programming that is most fundamental to our suffering and stress. Ignorance is blinding, so we don't see it. However, we may acknowledge the tendency to handle or prejudge situations through biased perceptions. My take on how you should be. The problem with women is. And then it becomes the problem with me is. But when an analysis and viewpoint proceeds or even replaces the occasion that it should be the result of, something's got to be wrong. We're not actually fully with what's in front of us. We're in a program talking to our formulated perceptions and impressions. Yet we love these fabricated attitudes. They cut out the awkward process of being with things afresh, and they are handy. They're old Kamma, stored up as Chitta Sankara. Even if our attitude is one of sidelining or suppressing our emotions, that too is a pattern and a program. And so is delighting in and affirming the emotions as, this is true and real. Thus, without apparently doing much at all, there is mental Kamma. It can be good or bad or mixed, but it forms a mental standpoint out of moment-by-moment resonances. And through this, we feel preoccupied, very busy being me. The program for verbal Kamma, Vachi Sankara, formulates thoughts and speech. It operates through a twofold process. Firstly, the rational mind scans for a sensory impression or a heart impression and names it. Cow, bell. This is bringing to mind, or directed thought, vitaka. In tandem with that, it checks out how that concept really fits. It fine-tunes or evaluates and may give rise to further concepts. The cow looks sick, angry. This is evaluation, vichara. The whole dynamic is powered by an impulse to define, to be clear, and plan. But when the program becomes compulsive, the mind gets crowded with feedback loops of conceiving and evaluating, planning and pondering. We might be an incessant thinker, or a worrying thinker, or someone who is pleased by thinking, who enjoys the ability to generate ideas, or our thinking might go in spurts, moving backwards and forwards, confused, ragged, and uncomfortable, thinking about how to stop thinking. We can get restless, absorbed in our own inner chatter, and not see things directly as they are. So the verbal programs affect the mind. We get pleased with, fascinated, or depressed by our thoughts and capacity to think. Hence, verbal Kamma feeds mental Kamma and becomes a source for action. Finally, the program for bodily Kamma is Kaya Sankara, the flow of body energy around breathing. Because of breathing, the body, energized or in rest state, is a dynamic process, and its vitality, or lack of it, pleases, fascinates, or disappoints us. So this process affects the mind. Therefore, the crucial program, the one everything feeds back to, is Chitta Sankara. Furthermore, it is through its interpretations and responses that fresh Kamma gets generated. It also carries the underlying bias of ignorance, that self-view. Therefore, for clarity and release, we work on the patterning and programs of the mind by using two meditative programs, samatha and vipassana. With samatha, we calm and steady the entire system through clearing and directing the thought faculty, brightening and steadying the bodily energy, and gentling the heart. And as we do this, we review the Sankara programs with insight. When I interpret this thought or energy as me or mine, does that lead to tension and stress? And how does this mood get sensed as mine? The aim of insight is specifically to clear the self-view, its biases, and the holding on, defending and needing that comes with that. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. Sadhu. 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 Thank you for spending this morning with me.